everybody. Welcome back to another episode of The Skeleton Crew. I'm your host, Jen Callahan, and tonight I have a great guest with me. His name is Adam Isley. Adam, thanks for being with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. Very excited.
I'm excited to have our conversation. Adam is doing a startup company. He began it about a year ago or close to a year, and he's the founder of a new company called Artemis Immersive. And I'm not going to mishmash through exactly what they're doing. I'm going to leave it up to Adam because it's really interesting of a new take for patient and provider healthcare, basically. So go ahead, Adam, start us off.
Perfect. I love it. So Artemis Immersive, we focus on creating 3D experiences for patients to better understand their healthcare, better understand the things that they can do with their health to put themselves in a better position. And it's really kind of focused on this idea of patient empowerment. And if a patient's empowered and they're educated and their health journey is guided, right, do they have better outcomes just sort of naturally because they've been put in a position of empowerment? And so we've got a number of different concepts for it. We've got an early product that's not released yet, that's like a VR telehealth concept. And then we have one now that we're in the middle of releasing called VoxScan Medical, which takes CT scans and MRI images and compiles them into one 3D anatomically accurate. It's just the patient data, digital human. And with that, you can highlight different anatomical features, such as like if you only want to see the bone structure in it and you don't want anything else getting in the way of that, you can highlight just that. Conversely, right, if you wanted to just focus on a volumetric space like the lungs, right, and seeing inside the lungs, you can remove all of the more dense anatomical regions around it. We're pretty excited about the potential. It's designed as a patient education or counseling tool. So a way for a care provider to have an easier time explaining to a medical layperson what is being highlighted in the DICOM imagery and what's going on with their particular health condition.
So I know that you're in the pilot phase of it. Have you brought this out into any healthcare systems yet?
We are in the process now of talking through the implementation of it. There's one large healthcare system that we've been planning out several locations, multiple cancer centers. So it's kind of been our, big first start. We're trying to make sure that we take the time to do it right as we begin to roll it out, sort of seek that product market fit, right? Early user feedback, early stakeholder feedback, be able to incorporate it into the product, make changes to the experience to make it more useful, et cetera. We've got a handful that we're planning to roll out for. Pretty excited about it, but definitely still looking for clinics to partner with and roll it out.
It's great that, say, if they're looking at a cyst or like a possible tumor, you can just highlight those two kidneys or maybe even just the one kidneys. Am I right?
You are right. It also shows variation in specific organs. So we pulled up data sets from an NIH cancer study for liver cancer and started to work with that. As you highlight that image and you start to work with the data and slice into it, even the organs itself, the areas of it are of a physiological anomaly, right? Or it's a growth of some sort that's a different density than the other material in the organ in it. It highlights naturally. So it serves as a way to really visualize things that out of place is the right word, but things that don't match the normal physiology.
As you were saying, it's patient empowerment. So think of yourself going in and like Adam was sharing a story with me. And if you want to, you can say it again, but you go in and you get news of something that like you went to go get a CAT scan of because something is possibly suspected. And you get bad news that you do have a tumor. We have to take a biopsy. We have to do this. But at that point, you just shut down. You hear tumor, you probably think cancer, maybe you're by yourself and you're watching the doctor talk to you, but you're not processing anything that they're saying to you. So Adam's software, I don't want to go into how you were explaining to me how useful it is for the patient, what they can do after the appointment, what the software offers.
Yeah, in that example, right? It's not just like you don't know all of the details of the report because you're in somewhat of a state of shock, right? Then you go home and you get to retell that story, which is kind of a blank memory to whatever family members you have or whoever else is in the care process with you, which becomes difficult if you don't remember, what was actually said. So we built in a record feature that allows when a care physician is presenting the results of a diagnosis made by a radiologist and they're walking the patient through it, they can hit a record button and it records the screen. So the patient will have a video of the care provider showing them the places of concern. And it also records their voice. So that one video, right, becomes a medical report for the patient that, they can scan a QR code and it brings it up on their phone, or there's several ways that you could provide it to them. They can just, use their user ID and log right into the system and see it. And these files are like gigs, sometimes more in file size, which, is the reason for the whole CD-ROM being one of the more common methods of transporting it. So having an option that's in the cloud that's lightweight in terms of no one has to carry around a gig and a half size files on them, right? They can just access it either from a video or from the cloud.
So how does it, like, say a CAT scan or MRI tech, it performs the scan, and then they do whatever processing that they need. They send it through, it goes to PACS. Where does your software come in the mix of that?
The easiest way would be for us to write an API of some sort directly from our software to the imaging device. When the scan is performed and they're selecting their location from where they want to save the record, right, we essentially have our backend as exposed as one of those locations. That's the easiest way, right? When someone goes in and gets the scan, it automatically populates in the patient record on our system. That way, it doesn't add like another thing for a care provider to do. Like they're not having to go to the computer or a separate device and then upload a bunch of records. And,
Right.
it's all just simple. The other path on that is it does have an import feature, and it just opens like a Windows Explorer window, and you just select the DICOM folder and just hit import. It takes like a minute, minute and a half, depending on file size. It's pretty quick.
And that would be importing from like a CD-ROM.
If it's a patient that has their own record in hand, or they're bringing it into whatever clinic, maybe they're bringing in their previous scans or whatever it may be, yeah, they can upload it directly from that. If the imaging device is a location on our provider's network, they can upload it from there as well, or from other shared drives that the network may have. So it's pretty flexible in terms of implementation. It just kind of depends on, does a provider want to do this for every patient? Do they want to do it for like specific types of scans? So we try to be flexible with it.
So you're doing this startup thing, but what were you doing prior to this and what led you to go into this journey?
So immediately prior to this, I was head of product design for a large clinical research organization. At any given time, there were between 25 and 30 different software applications that usually were acquired from a startup or, another company, and they probably bring it in their portfolio. So it's my job to try to align the behaviors of the software and the user experience as much as possible to kind of this never ending library of applications, which as you do the acquisition led thing over a period of time, like your tech stack kind of becomes like the history of the internet, is one of my colleagues was fond of saying, just because you've got pieces of software from all along the journey, right? So it was a very challenging role, but a very good one in terms of learning how to simplify a process and get user from point A to point B and what they're trying to do. Right after that role, I had got a bit of passion for patient experience, et cetera, and really wanted to focus on that. Towards the end of my time in that last role, I was focused on creating patient experiences, and I really saw the application of 3D animations and interactive models as a way that, one, you can save provider time, because as a provider is going to spend their 20 minutes with a patient or whatever variation of that is. You do like a cardiologist example, right? If a person's going in for like a stent procedure, they're going to spend 5 to 10 minutes explaining what a stent is, probably for every one of those appointments that they have all day long, right? As opposed to talking about, well, this is why we're worried about this specifically for you. Here's your physiology, right? That's giving us concern. They're kind of starting at ground zero. So we had a animation of a stent procedure where, it was interactive and it would just highlight in a 3D model. And it gave us this idea of, can we create really engaging patient experiences that educate them about what they're going to be seeking in terms of treatment, or what the disease condition that they're worried about is, before they go in to see their provider, so they're prepared, had a minute to think about what questions would they have, et cetera. It's not just like you go in on the spot and then get a bunch of medical education and be expected to ask the things that you need to ask. And so it started there. We left the company, hired the team that was working with at the time, and we started on this journey of trying to create patient engagement tools that would do just that. Along that way, we're working with one in VR and started to work with DICOM images in that same environment. At the time, my mother had just gotten another hip replacement, which, fantastic. She's in her 80s and like her goal is to live as much of that as she can. And I love it. Right. But so go to the hospital, I won't say which one, with her, to do the post-op. And the PA is, very nice, very good care. I mean, the surgery went great, but the PA was like, well, we show you the records, but it's all going to look gray. You wouldn't be able to see it anyways. Like when we print it, it's just like one slab of gray sheet straight across. And at the same time, right, like during the workday, I'm seeing these very compelling 3D DICOM digital twins of patient data sets. And like, okay, we've got to get this out of VR and get it into a desktop application that could be used by patients or care providers or radiologists or, whoever may find value of it. And so that's how we ended up where we are today. Before that, I was in pharma for a while. I was at GFK, where I started my career and really, got super excited about the business of healthcare as a career. Started off in an audit position, looking at sales and marketing practices, looking at IT, security. Moved from that into a brand management position for one of the pharmaceutical line, then transitioned over to HCP or provider marketing, looking at like segmenting different provider behavioral segments and understanding like what their goals are and when it comes to treating their patients. And after that, was able to have an opportunity to launch a brand, a direct to consumer brand. And so, I kind of felt like I've been seeing all these different behavioral aspects of healthcare and of the stakeholders in the system. And yeah, it was just very, very exciting. And really product design is kind of there's obviously a technology element to it that is not present in marketing or commercialization, but the biggest part of it, just like with marketing, is really understanding your customer and your consumer and what their needs are and what their objectives are, et cetera, which is my opinion, like the most important part of the product design process, right? Is really understanding what the person is trying to do, the environment they're in, what they're used to, all these kinds of things.
This episode is brought to you by xraytech.org, the rad tech career resource. If you're considering a career in radiology, check out xraytech.org to get honest information on schools, degree options, career paths, and salaries. I was reading one of the articles that you had shared on Artemis Immersive's LinkedIn, how you're going to be part of, was it the 5 startups in North Carolina? The article was saying how you and your wife developed a company, which I love.
I think she does too most of the time. She was a practicing pharmacist, and I think she was kind of looking to do something different. There was myself, her, and there's 4 other founders, that we started this with, and we've got a team of 8 full-time and 12-ish part-time, depending on, how much work we've got going on, et cetera. But it does lend itself to like work all the time, right? Because we're always around each other. And so it's always, you're just thinking in the back of your head, like, what about this thing that I was thinking about earlier in the day? And, she's right there. So it's like you bounce the ideas off of her. So.
Right. Yeah, you're just cooking dinner and you're cutting up peppers and something and like,
right.
And then you're just like talking shop while you're cooking.
Don't even realize it, right?
Yeah.
So it's been an amazing journey though, for sure.
What challenges have you faced developing this?
The development side, I think I won't use the technical definition of that, but just in terms of like getting the product off the ground, I think it's tough to navigate healthcare networks right now, especially if you don't have a presence in there. Especially if you're a startup that, you look at like the life cycle and the sales cycle of these large organizations, and that in of itself is a long time. And then you add in whatever designations you're going to get under like a reimbursement plan. And so that, a hospital system or a clinic can get reimbursed for the services through insurance. And like, there's all these things that like every time it's like another 3 months, another 3 months, another 3 months. Just getting to the right people, I think, and being able to show people this is something that can help. This is something that's different. That's probably been one of the biggest challenges. There's definitely been technical things that we've had to work through, but at least from my perspective, and maybe it's because I'm the one who's like out there running around trying to get it in front of everyone, that I feel that. But I do think that like the commercialization of it is kind of the hardest thing. And there's so many questions to answer. Like, is this something that ends up getting offered as like a revenue source for providers, like something that they could use to sell as like an add-on? Do we want to be adding more money to patients' load when they're trying to? There's all these things to consider, and there's not really a right answer, right? It's always kind of like a portion of everything and depends on the situation. But it's been a lot of fun.
So, people that you're contacting within these health systems, who have you figured out are the people that you need to talk to? Is it like chief of radiology? Is it like heads of certain department, like, certain like surgical departments, maybe?
So the main tactic we've employed to like get our foot in the door is literally show up with a basket of fruit or a thing of cupcakes and just explain your local business or a small business, and this is what we're trying to do. And it's a pretty visually engaging product. So luckily, right, it's got that going for it. But it's usually me just walking in, introducing myself, leaving them some kind of a treat, asking if I can set up time. Depending on the size of the institution, if it's a larger, so the larger network that we're working with, it's someone that's in a strategy role. And, that's kind of where it starts, a strategy or an innovation role. And then they facilitate, like, here's a conversation with the head of the radiology department. Some of them will have like patient experience teams, which is kind of helpful because a lot of institutions' reimbursement rates are based on like patient satisfaction scores or patient experience scores. So they've got, some vested interest in definitely improving the patient experience. If it's like a smaller 8 to 15 chain kind of, or 8 to 15 clinic kind of chain, they usually have a practice manager that sort of runs the operations of it. So what are we going to be, investing in terms of software, equipment, marketing, et cetera. And at least in the experience we've had, there's the two personas, I guess, that end up making the decisions and helping move it forward.
So you have the box scan going on, but you also too have at least one or two other different platforms that you're working on, right?
So we've been calling it a patient empowerment platform. And essentially what it is, it's a collection of 3D interactive content. We can surface it to a number of different areas. So, as we were trying to improve the patient experience, there's a VR heavy part to our work. So a lot of the work we do is in VR. But, like patients aren't going to be sharing a headset in a waiting room. There's elements of the healthcare experience that aren't conducive to that. And so, plus, not everyone has a headset, and it's not as commonplace as it probably needs to be to do what we want to do right now. So we took the approach of thinking, how can we engage patients and providers in an experience that isn't limited to one device? So we can send things to your phone that are like interactive animations that explain whatever condition that you might have, or explain like what a treatment process looks like. And, that could happen on your phone, right? Someone, if they do have a VR headset, they can use that for it. Works on the AR kit on their phone, so they can like put a giant beating heart in their living room if they want to, or they can just like log in on a desktop. The concept is, if we're trying to alleviate some of the pressure in the healthcare system, specifically on providers, and make it easier for them to give a better patient experience, how do we start offloading things that a provider is going to need to cover in that patient visit? So giving the stent example, it's a great one, right? If they're used to having to provide an explanation of what a stent is at the beginning of every cardiology exam that goes that direction, this is a very well-educated and operationally expensive provider that's having the same conversation over and over and over again. Let's create a like 3D engaging game or animation or something that tells what that is. A patient can engage with that in the waiting room while they're waiting. And so instead of, thinking about how much longer is it going to be before I can get in there to see my patient or get in there to see my physician, they're like playing with something, right? And we would took a flower vase and put QR codes all over it and would put it in the patient waiting room. And then, as they're sitting there waiting for their next meeting to come in, waiting for the provider to come see them, they can play with it and learn from it. And so it's an evolution of, you go into a provider's office and there's all the little pamphlets on the wall that explain the conditions. It's just bringing that to life for people.
That's nice, but then they can access again when they go home. They can continue to watch it. And then it alleviates them scrolling through Google and Googling what they just got their diagnosis of. And not to say like the diagnosis is like life-threatening or anything, but the internet has its ups and it has its downs. And in terms of medical care and healthcare, sometimes it can give you some scary information that doesn't really correlate to what your condition is.
Yeah, or maybe it reflects like a really niche, thin silo of the population that has a specific condition. And, you have a cough and then you think you've got some serious, like life-threatening condition. Like
Right.
the WebMD stuff, right? Especially when it first came out. I mean, anytime you feel like you're sick, you go on there and it's like, oh, great, I'm going to die. Oh, great, I'm going to die, right? Like, oh, I just sneezed. Like 5 more years off my life expectancy. I'm obviously, kidding. But, this way the provider can have input into what information is being shared, right? So we showed them our library of animations and engaging content, right? They can determine that they want to put these different modules out there or these different animations, and they're not having to go out and create all this content themselves, but they can still have control of, we don't have loony messaging, right, going out to our patients or messaging that is contradictory towards the protocol that they want to use.
So I think an interactive thing like that sounds awesome. I mean, one, I know you had said about like seeing a pamphlet like in the doctor's office, and like pamphlets are great and all, but let's be honest, they usually get folded, they get put into a purse, they get put into a pocket of something, and they usually like stay there for a good amount of time. I mean, it's just looking at a flat image, it has information, but I like the interactive portion of it. And I'm sure, it's more engaging for patients and keeps them not even interested. I mean, that's a weird thing to say about their health, but it's just more interesting, you know what I mean? And probably would explain more, especially if it's showing different parts of the body of, what they're doing, or like how you're talking about like a stent procedure, like maybe it's actually showing like the leg that is having a stent put in it and how a catheter or the wire is put down and then a catheter and then like a balloon has to put down to open up the vessel and then the stent goes down and then it's cranked to open. It's an interactive thing so they can actually understand and they're not going on and Googling that.
Exactly. My dad had a stent and I still didn't really know what it was, right? Until we started building the animation for one. And, it's just like you said, like it's got the guide wire goes in, the cage inflates, the guide wire comes out, but it's like one of the, like, do you know what a stent is? Yeah, yeah. And, like I know it's a cardiac procedure and that they often do it, but I didn't know what a guide wire was. I didn't know how the cage expanded, et cetera. And it visually, right, if you're like watching it, it's much faster for most people to understand what's going on than reading it. See figure one, you look at figure one, right? You try to understand this word that you don't understand, and it's just easier depending on where you are, right? If you're in a location where maybe for a lot of your patients, English isn't their first language, good luck, right? Is what we've had a lot of physicians tell us, that like I'm trying to explain to someone and they don't have great English what's going on. They're looking at me like nodding their head. I have no idea if they know what I'm talking about. I have no idea if they don't know what I'm talking about. Your providers tell the story about like, so I pull out my phone and I start Googling, to show them an image because, like you say, the pamphlet only goes so far.
Speaking of people who speak different languages, something I'm not sure if you've already thought of this or not, but do you offer these videos in different languages?
We don't. I mean, the video that would come from it, right? It's not actually recording voiceovers. It's going through and you can click on a different element and it starts to show you what's happening in it. The different languages thing is a good idea, though, especially if you have a narrative or like an overview that of specific clinic or a physician wants to make sure is included. Of that idea. We're still working to make sure that we launch this within the US the right way. So, we've got to like focus on that first.
That's awesome. Do you have anything on like the horizon that you guys are hoping to develop or are kind of in the midst? Maybe anything like leeway that you are hoping for the company to move forward to?
Yeah, we've certainly got a lot of ideas. One of the things that keeps kind of coming back up is we've got this 3D environment, right? You can access it through a headset. In the very near future, you'll be able to log in and access it from a desktop. And the concept is it's like a surgical theater. So you could have up to 10 physicians or surgeons or whoever, right, all come in and look at a visual data set, collaboratively, right? So if they're planning a procedure, or if they want to bring in an expert that's an expert on a specific procedure or performing a specific diagnosis, and maybe they're world renowned and they're only in some other location, you can have them join. And I hate to even call it telehealth because it's not. When telehealth first started coming out, I was like, oh, there's all these ideas of like you're gonna have like floating healthometers in the air and you're going to be collaborating with like your physician, and then you get on there and it's like this Zoom, right?
Yeah.
I think that we've got a very large potential to use that to really begin to disrupt. If you're in a rural setting and you're driving 2 hours to get a scan done, and then you've got to come back in 2 or 3 weeks or whatever it is to see the results of it. Do you need the person to drive 2 more hours out there, right? Could they get into a headset and like review with the physician or the care provider, their anatomical record? And so I think that there's a ton of opportunity in this space with looking at how we facilitate collaboration, and as different peripheral devices or, AR headsets, VR headsets, 3D holographic displays become more and more prevalent, that you're going to be able to do some really amazing and engaging things without having to be face to face.
That's cool. Are you hoping to stay just solely within your company, or are you looking to like branch out to see if there's like anyone else out in the field that would like to collaborate with Artemis?
We're looking to form partnerships with different clinics or different networks, right? And I think we haven't figured out everything about this application. We know based on the patient feedback that we've gotten and shown it to basically 2 clinics or 2 different settings, and both of them we're in contracting conversations with. So far, so good. So, I mean, it hasn't had a ton of exposure, and there is value in getting it in front of a larger handful. So if there are any clinics out there that are interested in, trying to explore the software with us, would love to establish a partnering relationship where we can help customize it to the specific needs of that care provider or that network. So definitely looking for that.
You got something great going on there. And good luck on the upcoming. Are you going to be doing a lecture, or is it a spotlight for startups in North Carolina?
I think it's another pitch competition. So
Okay.
it's in the middle of a vendor show for SaaS software, and it's put on by company SaaS that is from this area also. And it has a notorious reputation for having like the most amazing benefits package ever. And they really like went pretty far to make people never want to leave the company, right? Once they're there, which is great. And I think that the box scan could be a pretty compelling employee benefit for someone. So if they're ever in a position where they have medical imaging and maybe the clinic that they get the scans from hasn't tried it yet, they could use that. And so it'll be interesting to test that premise out. Not sure yet if I'm going to do that the first time on stage or not, but yeah, we'll see.
Well, I'm sure it'll go great. I wish you nothing but the best with that. And everybody, this is Adam Isley with me tonight talking about the new startup company that he's doing for patient and provider empowerment together. Thanks, Adam. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, Jen, it was great. Thanks for having me.
Everyone, keep your eyes and ears out, especially if there's providers or anyone from health systems that are listening in about Artemis Immersive, and maybe get in contact if it's something that you're interested in bringing into your health system. So catch us in another week with another great guest talking about all the things of radiology and healthcare. We'll see you next week. You've been watching The Skeleton Crew, brought to you by xraytech.org. On the next episode, join us to explore the present and the future of the rad tech career in the field of radiology.